And we are live. Welcome into the Fieldhouse Files live post-game show as the Pacers have taken a 3-1 series lead on the Milwaukee Bucks after getting it done here Sunday night, 126-113 the final. Appreciate those of you who have joined in here on this live YouTube page. If you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe here to the YouTube page. Give it a like the page as well in this post and keep growing it. All kinds of Pacers fever and unique content right here on YouTube. But what a performance by the Pacers tonight. Wasn't flawless. It had its concerns, in particular with how things went defensively for much of the game and allowing for this Bucks team that was entirely shorthanded to hang around and just hang around. And that was a growing concern entering this one. That's why I think Rick Carlisle, both with us media and to his team inside the locker room, 3 hours before tip-off, frequently emphasizing how you cannot take them lightly, have to stay on the Milwaukee Bucks, have to take them seriously. And we're so familiar with this. I've talked about this at length on the Fieldhouse Files podcast. And of course, I'll post this later on if you joined late or just want to listen back to this if you missed something. But how many different times, probably 10 plus losses this past regular season that they should not have had. Right? Couple to the Portland Trail Blazers, to the Charlotte Hornets, to the Wizards. I've talked at length about that, so I won't get back into that here. But what we see from this Pacers team is they held tight the third quarter, which is their best and the best in the league, held true. And that's exactly what they needed in a game like this in front of their home crowd. And the Pacers now 7-0, undefeated in the last month of home games, going back to late March there. They won both of these home games in the playoff series, which is exactly what you have to do. And on top of that, to make matters better, they were able to take one game to start the series up in Milwaukee. So now it'll shift back to Milwaukee for Game 5 coming up on Tuesday. And we'll know here in a couple hours what time that will be at and on what network. If the series with the Suns and Timberwolves extends to 5 games, which I think is highly unlikely. I feels like the Suns are done. But if it does go 5 games, and the game I think is at 9 p.m. and on NBA TV as well as Bally Sports. But if the Timberwolves sweep, finish the job, keep it moving, it's a 9 p.m. Eastern tip on Tuesday for Game 5, and it is on TNT. So that's what you can keep in mind. And those listening back to this on replay, by then you'll probably have your answer. So where do you start in this one? I think you start with the physicality. I think you start with the tensions and the emotions, and you can understand it really, I think, for both teams. By the way, feel free, everyone watching on here, utilize the chat, ask away. Feel free to leave some comments. Yeah, Romy Gnome has already got things started, so I appreciate that. But feel free to utilize the comments. I'm happy to answer all questions and maybe to discuss something that I have not hit on as well here. It's my 12th year covering this Pacers team. I've been around the Fieldhouse since 2003, which is crazy to believe. But this was a win that the Pacers desperately needed because now they have a chance. Get this. When they close out the series, they're going to. Maybe it's Tuesday, maybe it's later on. But once they get that one more win, the Pacers will win their first playoff series in a decade, since 2014, the Paul George days, the good old days, many of you may refer to it as, right? And during that process, there's been a lot of new fans come through that have not experienced this, that have experienced instead Victor Oladipo, Domantas Sabonis, all those iterations. So this is a new group, very different set and playing style. And we saw what the Pacers did throughout the regular season. That's what this game looked like for much of it. In terms of high scoring at both ends, Pacers didn't get stops. They struggled defensively. And I think that's clearly something that they had to work on going into the second half. But going back to the start of the game, what was it? 7 minutes into the game. Well, really, let's start with I don't get this. It was lame. But the couple of technicals, one each to both teams. First, Pascal for taunting. He just looked at him. Didn't even shake his head or point at him, anything demonstrative, which I think is more the letter of the law. More specifically, just kind of looked at him. Yes, it was intently, but he did. Then Patrick Beverley did the corny too small thing, which I think is about 5 years too late. Let's move on from that. I don't mind some taunting and some fun. These are high stakes again. They are emotion filled. These are the most fun days for these players, so they should enjoy it. They should react appropriately. And in both cases, it was in good fun, in good tension. Even though I didn't personally like the too small thing, just because it's what it is. Then you go a couple more minutes later into the game, around the 5-minute mark of the first quarter. Bobby Portis and Andrew Nembhard get tangled there on the south baseline, kind of near the Bucks bench. And first of all, credit both teams and coaching staffs for keeping their players on the benches. They went to replay, first looked at the incident, and then the benches. No issues there. And I think that's thankfully something that has not become an issue, because years ago, right, how many times would a player or two that wasn't involved at all be disqualified, unable to play, and then disqualified for the next game as well? We don't need all that. Bobby Portis has crazy eyes. You don't want to mess with crazy eyes. And you can tell even going back to the regular season when he was ejected at a game up in Milwaukee. If I remember correctly, it was Game Ball Gate, part of Giannis Antetokounmpo's 64-point performance. That was a franchise record for the Bucks. And in doing so, I mean, Portis just gets into it. That's on your scouting report, by the way, as much as what he does on the floor from a contribution standpoint, point scoring. And he was solid last game. I think he was, if I remember right, I feel like he was like 15 points, 19 rebounds. So that was impactful, even more so considering their circumstances, which I'll get into here in just a second. Romy Noam, thanks for making this drive back to Fort Wayne Pleasant. My pleasure. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you read my work at fieldhousefiles.com and tune into the Fieldhouse Files podcast as well. But thanks for the note, and drive safely. Anyone else, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments as I continue on here. There was a tangle up. And by the way, going off of what we talked about in game 3, Nembhard's got an edge to him. I'm not quite like an asshole edge, but he's got a little something to him, a little fierceness and competitiveness that we knew, but a little fierce edge is coming out of him here in the postseason. And every team needs a couple of guys just like that. If Benedict Mathurin, also part of that draft class 2 years ago, by the way, if he was out there, he would absolutely be the same way. In addition to his success he had against the Bucks during the regular season, and his ability as well to get to the free throw line, those are some of his best attributes, no question about that. And so they are missing Mathurin, by the way, but Nembhard is not going to just stand his ground. I mean, we saw Bobby Portis put his arm, it looked like, around his neck. Nembhard shoved him off a little bit. Then Portis came back with like a two-handed shove, and it looked like it was kind of upper neck area, and that's an obvious no-no. You're gone. Kind of clear as day live, and then even more so, I thought, on replay. So I hated to see it. I want every team, in my perfect world, every team to be at full strength, at full bill of health, and on top of Portis getting canned with 5:01 to play in the first quarter, which is far too early. I mean, he contributed 4 points and 3 rebounds in the 7 minutes that he was out there. That's just inexplicable. If you're Doc Rivers and that Bucks team, that you lose your guy and a veteran like that, you don't expect for that. And already, probably should not have delayed the lead here, but the fact that early Sunday, I was standing at Indiana Fever practice after Bucks shoot around, and that's when the team announced that Damian Lillard, who seemingly was going to be out after suffering a grade 1 strain of his Achilles once more, which probably means he's done for the series. Jeff Stotts, great athletic trainer, friend of the Fieldhouse Files, tweeted that that injury at minimum usually keeps guys out about 10 days. So that's the rest of the series. So that becomes a challenge. And on top of that, Giannis and his status moving forward. Now, Doc Rivers said before the game that Giannis went through some shoot around, got some shots up, started doing a little bit more, but they are not going to put him out there until they can feel completely right about it. And considering the circumstances, this Bucks team this season, that they're down 3-1 in this series, and both are Achilles injuries, which is the worst injury in sports. Yeah, you don't want to mess with that. I would not be surprised if both players are shut down for the rest of the series, because one thing goes wrong and it's Kevin Durant all over again. And so then you'd pay him for all of next season. Really, either one of them, Giannis or Dame, both Achilles injuries or concerns. then you lose them for all of next year in addition to the rest of this postseason. So, yes, you obviously lean on the doctors and the player, but just from the outside looking in, I would not expect either to play the rest of the series. Couple more comments. Tanner says not to get ahead of ourselves, but it feels like any series after this is house money. How do they stack up against the rest of the East? Rest of the East, 4 games into the playoffs, records aside. Yeah, that is big picture. I will dive into that though, and I completely agree. It's house money after this. To me, going into the season, Tanner, the thought was you need to get back to the playoffs. Not talking play-in, you need to get back to the playoffs. They did that. Once you acquired Pascal Siakam, I thought the floor and the ceiling raised. So instead of being the maybe 6 seed, certainly not playing would be tolerable, I feel like. But certainly you expected them to at least be the 6 seed, and you thought there was a chance that they could get to the 4 or 5 seed, and really they could have and should have. But again, they played with their food. They messed around against these lower teams. Late in the season, what was it? A late loss to the Cavs. I think the Raptors a couple of times. That Cavs one in particular. You win that, and I believe they were the 4 seed. Now, then you're facing the Magic. I don't like that matchup either. So that becomes very difficult. That was one of the teams I wanted for them to avoid. I thought they'd want the Cavs, and now you've seen them roll over against the Magic the last 2 games. So there you go. Now moving forward, it's going to be the Knicks, I think. And that's what I expected all along as well with that series. I've never believed in this iteration of the 76ers since the process over the last decade. I'm really like what Joel Embiid can do. The trouble is his body just says no too often. The same is true for Kawhi Leonard. At least Joel is able to force it, able to push himself, able to be out there. Pacers have no answer for Embiid, much like the rest of the league doesn't have an answer for Embiid as well. So when you look ahead to the next possible series, it would be Knicks or Sixers. It's going to be the Knicks, I think, that move on. Now, what's favorable for the Pacers is the fact that Julius Randle is out for the season, had surgery, I believe. And in doing so, that was a terrible mismatch for the Pacers. Plus his physicality. He would own that inside matchup, I think. And so him being out is certainly advantageous for the Pacers. And so just from a quick thought, feels like that one could go either way. With the Knicks, they're going to it's the clash of 2 very different styles, right? So the Pacers want to play fast, run a gun, set the pace, shoot 3-pointers. Meanwhile, old school Tom Thibodeau wants to slow it down. It's all about defense, physicality, toughness. That's a grinded out physical durability type series that I think the Pacers would have a chance at. A lot would hinge on OG Anunoby and what he's able to do as well, and that's fun because of Pascal Siakam. Then after that, I think it really becomes difficult to speculate. It's got to be the Boston Celtics. I don't like that matchup. Assuming their health, I see the Celtics and have all season long seen the Celtics cruise their way to the finals where things get interesting is what I'm expecting with the Denver Nuggets. Probably the Nuggets, again, pending health. Let's get to other quick questions because there will be plenty more time for that. Tanner, thanks for that question. Sean says, did it seem like the Pacers made this game a little bit more difficult than they should have? They could have had a straight line layup whenever they wanted. That one might be better, easier to look at on the tape, I guess. But it seemed like what bothered me was on the defensive end, just lack of effort sometimes. Guys getting blown past. Seemed like some communication breakdowns at times as well. That obviously is concerning for many reasons at this point. Again, the defense doesn't have to be great, but it shouldn't be awful like it was in the first half. And so what I did like is in the second half, not only did the Pacers outscore the Bucks in the third quarter by 10 points, but on top of that, third quarter allowed just 21 points. Fourth quarter, just 28 points. That's a total of 49 points. They didn't even allow 50 points in the second half. I don't care who you're playing. You're probably going to win that game. Double that, that's 100 points. It seems like, on average, like the playoffs right now are going like 105 to 97. Isn't it weird? Especially considering the way the season started and up until probably the All-Star break, points were just too easy for everybody to come by. I thought that was fascinating and is fascinating. The change of the style, obviously tonight a little different, defense lacking. As Giannis, Dame out, Middleton. I was surprised what Middleton was able to do. One, he was questionable coming into the game, a game time decision. Then Myles Turner inadvertently stepped on his left ankle 30 seconds into the second half. That was their first called timeout by Doc Rivers. He went to the locker room, came back out, stayed in there. Was not nearly the same player, but still was able to play when it looked like a hard turn. Then I think he's really going to feel that. And again, when you look at the upcoming schedule and Game 5 being less than 48 hours away, again, that favors the schedule because it just seems like this Bucks team this season has run its course. Someone else, another power right now is intervening, saying, nope, that's it. We're done. Nobody wants to watch this Bucks team if they have two Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, not playing. And as I wrote Saturday at fieldhousefiles.com, I don't like the fact that injuries are dictating so much of these playoffs. Talked about Julius Randle, Kawhi Leonard, no Jimmy Butler for the Miami Heat right now. You wonder about the Celtics. Jamal Murray, I think, is questionable for tomorrow's game with the Nuggets. That I don't like. So we shall see. Let's go back to the comments here. Granny Danger. By the way, I'd love for Danny Granger to make an appearance or show up. I haven't heard from him lately. Don't know what he's up to. That's a column I would love to write for sure. But he asked, Myles Turner, have it all. Yeah, Myles played tremendous in this one. Has played all series and has elevated his game seemingly with every next game. And he's done it in a variety of ways. He's going against a tough matchup at Brook Lopez. And I know going into this game, how could you not expect Brook Lopez to go off considering their numbers, who's available, and those sorts of things. And so he did just that, 27-9 tonight for Brook Lopez, who I commend. I really commend him for the way in which he added to his career, added longevity to it by adapting, becoming a three-point shooter, becoming more of an impactful player on the defensive end. And when they won their title like 3 years ago, I think he was Defensive Player of the Year or like second and maybe should have won it. Maybe Giannis won it that year. But either way, everyone knows that Brook Lopez is kind of the focal point of that Milwaukee Bucks defense. So he's been really impressive. And one is again tonight, on Sunday here in Game 4. But Myles was tremendous. How about outside of his free throw shooting? I like what he did. Fact that he was 7 of 9 from 3-point range. He's made at least 3-pointers in all 4 games. Tremendous. Exactly what they needed from a guy like him. And that makes up a little bit from other guys not hitting so well from 3-point land, although that was not the case tonight. Everything that went wrong in Game 1 did not in Game 4. Remember, I think they were like 20% from 3-point land in Game 1. Well, here in Game 5, they set a new franchise playoff record for 3-pointers. It was inevitable, considering the record was just 16 threes, and that was in the 2017 playoffs against the Cavs. But in this one, Pacers shot 51% from 3-point range, almost better from 3-point range than from the field at 51.7. 22 threes on 43 attempts. Better than 50%. It's going to be very difficult to beat any team that is shooting in those numbers at that percent. And that's what the Pacers, that's how they are built to win. They're built around Tyrese Halliburton, his playmaking, his setting teammates up, and then 3-point shooting. And I would argue, actually, they need more 3-point shooting. That's where losing Buddy Hield really cost you. Now, we did see Doug McDermott in this game. Less than 3 minutes. Went out there, attempted a couple 3-pointers, actually made one of them. I think it was his second one. Yeah. But it's so hard. That's on the player, too. That's so tough to just come out there cold off the bench, late first quarter. And it's like, well, everybody knows why you're out there. Everybody knows that you're being asked to knock down a 3-pointer. So that's where they're at right now. And it's basically still an 8-man rotation with Toppin, with McConnell, and with Shepard. Toppin came in that, I think, first quarter and rattled off a quick 6 points, a jumper, and 2 baskets at the rim. That was solid. And so after it was tied 33 all after the first quarter, second quarter is the Pacers' worst. They hung around, took a 3-point lead into halftime. And then from there, I think really separated themselves here in this Game 4 victory. But yes, going back to the original note, not even a comment or question, Granny Danger, yes, Myles Turner played really well and was very impressive in this one. Nolan says, how are we feeling, Scott? How many will it take? 5 or 6? I think 5. It feels like this Bucks team is done, and you can't blame them. You're down 2 future Hall of Famers. Like, I'm not even talking like your top 2 scorers or 2 All-Stars, 2 future Hall of Famers. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Certainly not with Giannis, who's a 2-time MVP. It's going to be so hard, and the margins are slim. And the problems that they have had with the Pacers all season. Pacers have won 7 of 9 games against the Bucks this season. The Pacers really led to so many Bucks problems. Remember, they defeated them in the in-season tournament that had the locker room fuming. And then they defeated them a couple more times in January. Adrian Griffin fired. Then they hadn't faced them since those January days. So these are different iterations, and the Pacers are still having that success against the Bucks. So they've had their number and have done quite well. So I would be surprised if it takes more than one more game. Thanks for asking, Nolan. D, whoever that is, notes Pacers opened 3.5-point favorites Tuesday. I'm surprised by that. I thought it'd be more like 7.5. Even factoring in being on the road up at Fiserv Forum. Pacers have their number. They have health. The Bucks do not. Short turnaround. Throw in Patrick Beverley, by the way. I haven't mentioned him. He was wincing and like, how best to put it? Not limping, but like gliding up the court uncomfortably. It looked like a right thigh, hip, butt area. He was not comfortable, played only 20 minutes. You're already down Dame. You're already down Giannis. Middleton's not 100%. Chris Livingston's out. They're not in good shape right now. And Middleton, by the way, tweaked his ankle. We'll see what that looks like in less than 48 hours. What else do we got here? Trent says, any concern with Ty's back after the game? I don't think so. So my understanding is this is nothing new. This is kind of his DNA. And what I mean by that is Tyrese has battled low back tightness, soreness, uncomfortability for much of his career with that low back, just kind of how he was I don't know how he's made, what he's like. I don't know what it is specifically, but he always gets treatment on his low back. And he commended the Pacers training staff last year for kind of getting it under control and maybe understanding it a little bit better. Also, this is just me thinking here. When you have a left hamstring injury, what does that usually lead to? Knee or ankle problems or potentially back problems. So my guess is too, compensating that left hamstring just a little bit, which clearly still isn't 100%, still bothers him. He threw a heat pack on it. I noticed last game, for example. Maybe that lingers into that low back and just kind of makes whatever he deals with on a daily basis even more. So even worse. But on top of that, all these games, quick turnarounds now. I would love to see these games spread out a little bit more, having 2 games between days. Able to have one day to kind of look back and one day to look forward. But no, to simply answer your question, Trent, I don't believe it'll be a big issue. I like that Jalen Smith hadn't been bothered by that low back soreness. That one started to be concerning for me because it was frequent and it was late, so they couldn't really plan on it. It was usually like after lifting weights before games, and not like 2 days ahead of time. Hey, there you are, MK Sinks. I was wondering if you'd be back. A reliable, loyal follower here of Fieldhouse Files postgame show. He's made it on every single time, so welcome back. He says another team stat that sticks out. Pacers 6 players in double figures. Bucks had 3. Unselfish play ever since that game 1 loss. Love to see it. I agree. That definitely stands out. That's oftentimes when they are at their best. I don't think it is everything. And why I say that is because, as you know, because I mentioned this on this post-game show often, stars win in the postseason. So if the Bucks had won this game and Giannis went off for 45, you're not talking about depth. You're talking about stars. So, yes, I think that's the way in which this Pacers iteration wins. For them to win big long-term, you need another star in there because you can see the roster can be consolidated down. Regular season, it's great to have depth. In the postseason, you're playing 8, 9 guys, really. So if you could consolidate 2 or 3 guys into one all-star caliber player, that's what you're looking for. That's what I would like to see, MK Sinks, in the offseason for the Pacers to better position themselves to next year, to go back to maybe our first conversation. I forget what that was. Maybe that was with Tanner's question. That would, by consolidating the roster and doing that, that would better position yourselves from going for this season. You want to make the playoffs and taste that again, get that experience. Next year, contend in the East is what you're looking at for sure. Nolan back again, says Myles, exceptional play in this series has me wondering, is he due for a paid already? Didn't he just get paid? I thought he had 1 more year of his contract, but is it extension time? Yes, that's right. He has 1 more year under contract. It was not this February or in January, actually, into January. I was on my drive down to Bloomington to check out an IU basketball game. I remember when the Pacers reached agreement with his agent, Austin Brown, on a 3rd contract to keep him around since 2015. But yeah, you could have talks this summer on an extension. Things you'll start to consider those. What is he now? Like 20, I don't know. Let's do the math, right? 2015, add 10 years, 8. So he's 28, 29. that's when you start to worry a little bit about bigs. Now, you can tell absolutely right now Myles is in his prime. You would love to have him on next year as you have him under contract. But after that, once he reaches 30, we saw Roy Hibbert, for example, different player, different style, different age. I get that totally. Back to the basket, all that thing. He's not shooting threes. Myles is. That's a different conversation. But Myles, entering 30, you do start having concerns about your center. And I think that's where you're thinking already. Is it Isaiah Jackson? Is it Jalen Smith? Maybe you agree to another 1 year, 2 year extension to keep him around. Yes, you could have those conversations then. But right now, the focus for both sides are absolutely just having success in the playoffs, because that's something Myles has not experienced truly since 2019. The 2020 bubble, they didn't really have a shot in it. Sabonis didn't play. Victor was half of himself trying to rehab and everything. But I appreciate the thought. Granny Danger wants to know, he says, after seeing the Knicks fan takeover in Philly today, I'm curious if something like that will happen in Philly. To some extent, yeah, I think so, because you do see some of that in Cambridge Fieldhouse, especially with the national brands, with the Lakers, with LeBron fans, wherever he is, Miami, Cleveland, for example. We saw some Toronto fans, I remember, in the postseason. That feels like 2015, I want to say. I wouldn't say takeover, but I think you would absolutely feel and hear Knicks fans at Cambridge Fieldhouse. And the other underwhelming factor in all this is the ease it is to get tickets. The Bulls have stunk for the last decade, yet they've continued to have sellout after sellout. I think they have the record ongoing for most consecutive sellouts in the NBA, I believe. They also have one of the largest arenas at like 20-some thousand. The Pacers, though, for example, 3,000-ish less. 17,274 is the Pacers number. And tonight was their 19th sellout of the season, back-to-back sellouts, as you would expect, being in the playoffs. But first, as always, the Pacers have to handle their business in Game 5 in advance to then presumably face the Knicks. Another thing from Nolan, Ty also wears that device around his lower stomach back area where he's on the bench. I'm assuming that helps with keeping low back pain at a minimum. Yeah, I'd be curious to wear it myself, but I believe you can set that. I think it's like a Normatec type thing. And you can set that to heat or cold. Believe he'll have that on heat during the game is what you want. A lot of times you'll see a heat pack wrapped in towel. I can't tell you how many hundreds, maybe thousands of heat packs I made for players back when I was getting started with the Pacers and Fever a couple decades ago. You'd make 26 ice bags after the game, and you'd make countless number of heat packs for players on the bench, usually for hands and for thighs, sometimes for their back area. So that's a little updated contraption to probably be more focused. Maybe there's kind of some vibration or massage elements into it. Just another tool that they can use. Here's something you may not know. The Pacers, along with many teams now, have specialty seats for their home bench, not for the visitors, but for them, such as they have heated seats. Did you know that? Pacers can reach down below. I think it's on their left side, press a button, and their seat on the bench is heated. Bucks have the same thing. Just another technological advancement and a way to take care of your home team. Again, thanks to everyone who has joined in here. The Fieldhouse Files live post-game show after the Pacers Game 4 win, 126-113. And if you missed earlier in the show or you're an avid listener, I will post this as well on the Fieldhouse Files podcast, or you could watch the replay here on YouTube. Sean says, do you think there's any reason to re-sign Jalen with the lack of playoff time, especially when there are other contracts like Pascal and even Obi? I think it all depends on the number right now, and certainly him not contributing in the playoffs probably bites into that, cuts into that, right? Because that's your current situation. I'll be curious what his number looks like. Remember, as I reported at Fieldhouse Files, when he re-signed a couple years ago, he had a couple better offers elsewhere, decided to stay with the Pacers because of Rick Carlisle in particular, but also the way in which he was utilized and the frequency he was utilized. So maybe he would rethink things due to his limited playing time. But like I've told all of you guys for the last several months, playoffs not about true depth. It's about having stars. It's about having playmakers, defenders, and in particular, guys that can create and go get their own bucket. When you're down, who's going to go score several baskets in a row? And we've seen Halliburton do it in spurts. We've seen Siakam. And I think we'll remember this Game 4 in particular for Myles Turner because he had several segments in which he did that. I haven't talked about him enough, so I want to re-emphasize what he did right now. In the third quarter, as I'm looking at my notes, midway through, he had the stretch in that third quarter, that dunk kind of, right? He didn't touch the rim, just kind of threw it down. But either way, spectacular. The one-handed throwdown on Brook Lopez. Then he had the block. Then he had that corner three-pointer as well. That sparked really keyed a 14-2 run for the Pacers. And that really took off from there. Then in the fourth quarter, on my At the Buzzer story that I just posted along with this video here, I think he kind of was the turning point. He was the best player in the game, but also the turning point when there in that fourth quarter, he went on an 8-0 run by himself. It became a 6-point game with, what was it? 98-92. He went 8 in a row, made it a 14-point game, and the Pacers were up by double digits the rest of the game. And during that stretch, it was even more special because Gainbridge Fieldhouse, with the home crowd, was chanting his name while he knocked down the second three-pointer in a row. And it's also even more special, guys, because remember, he has Turner's block. He has his own fan section up there in the corner, kind of section 1, I think, above one up there. About 7 rows, maybe 70 seats of Pacer fans that he gives tickets away every single game for like the last decade in conjunction with Mountain Dew. So tonight's one, Myles is not going to forget about anytime soon in his career because of those couple of runs, because of that throwdown on Lopez, and because the Pacers got the win in front of another sellout crowd, no doubt. Scott McCain joining. What's up, buddy? Good to see you on here. Way off topic, he says. What's going on with PG's extension, Paul George? Does he want to move? Lots of folks thinking he's going to Philly. Haven't done a ton of reporting on this. I'm guessing he's just leaving his options open, and I don't blame him because of the health of Kawhi Leonard in particular and the Clippers, though. Because why tie up when you have leverage? And I think right now when you're probably going to see them out in the first round, does he want to stay there and go back to that? I don't know. Maybe he wants to get a that'd be a 5th-year option if he signs for the full length of the contract, or maybe he did 3 years and did 2 years plus a player option. You want to keep and maintain your leverage, and so that's probably a factor in all that. Maybe the Clippers haven't agreed to a number, although I gotta believe it's a max or up to that, very close to that, because he's absolutely worth that. If not, he'll have no shortage of suitors, Philly being one. Of course, I think the Pacers would be interested. I don't think he would. I highly doubt at this point, not reporting this, I just highly doubt he's trying to move just because LA's home. He's got, I think, 3 kids now. He's got a wife, his parents. His mom's always kind of been not completely 100 healthy with her health. So I don't think he's probably motivated to leave that. However, he, like the Pacers right now, haven't won big since that partnership. And so he's probably wanting to experience some wins, some postseason success as he kind of finishes up the peak of his career and leans into whatever is next. But very much unclear. Appreciate the question, though. Chris Robertson says, hey, interesting your take that the team needs a superstar for postseason success. I don't disagree, but I do think there's a possibility that the Pacers could grow a superstar internally. Don't discount that for sure. I'm saying they need a superstar, however it is done. Whether it's internally, you're probably thinking Benedict Mathurin, or if it's from the outside. Because how about Pascal Siakam was the dominant player in the first 2 games. They've tried to remove him from the equation, lessen his impact, just 13. I love how I say just, but he nearly had a triple-double in 40 minutes. 13 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, impactful at both ends. He hasn't needed to dominate or take over, go get a bucket by any means, but he has that ability. He can. And so that's huge. Halliburton has showed a lot of that success. But if you're the Pacers, you want to make sure this is not the Hawks team from a decade ago. That's how a buddy referred to it. And I kind of understand that, where it's a collection of good guys, but you need stars. You look around the league, what's led Denver to titles? Nikola Jokic, easily the MVP in the NBA, the best player in the league the last 4 years. Talent wins out. On top of that, though, it's about the iteration of the team. I keep using iteration. It's all about how the the makeup of the team. And that, I think, is where Rob Pelinka in particular has completely failed LeBron and the Lakers, because that roster just does not make sense for LeBron and AD's abilities on top of the health issues. So you go from there, you build around Pascal, Tyrese, and their abilities. You have some success from within with their draft picks, which they hadn't until the last couple of years when they've been drafting really high. But the previous decade, outside of Myles Turner, very alarming, big red flags as they swing and a miss on so many. What they have done very well is making trades, acquiring players, and making the most of them. And right now, the best note of that is probably Pascal and Tyrese, but the low-key one is Aaron Nesmith. He was practically thought of as a throw-in, right? You were just trying to get rid of Malcolm Brogdon and his contract and get a first-round pick from the Boston Celtics in return. But in doing so, you took on a larger package. 3 guys I think you waived right away. Daniel Tice, I don't understand. The Pacers never believed in, never gave a true shot. They ultimately waived him so he could go to the Clippers. And then you also got Nesmith. That has worked out well. So I do believe they need another all-star type. But Chris, to be clear, it could come from inside or out. And he also adds, I would not pick up a superstar in their 30s who is injury prone and get rid of potential stars like Mathurin or Walker. Walker's years away, or a couple years away. It is disappointing. I would argue that he didn't get a ton of playing time this season, and now he's not even in the rotation, only because what did we talk about this Pacers team? Is how so many of them needed that experience, how so many of them needed to get these game reps and this environment reps and those sorts of things. And practically, he's not getting any of that right now. But it's one of those things that you understood he filled a need at the time. But then after that, they acquired Obi Toppin. You went and got Pascal Siakam. So both because of his youth, how he's not ready right away, his defense lacking a little bit more than perhaps they thought. Yeah, just because, and a lot of to give him credit too, there is they're playing a very different style than Houston, so that's a lot for him to adapt to, in addition to being a rookie. But him not playing there, you hate it, but you can kind of understand it. Again, that's probably a different conversation. Granny danger again. Myles always seems to have a massive dunk. He does. The biggest one that I think I've ever covered is Paul George's slam on Birdman down in Miami. I'll never forget that one. Tanis adds, would like to see Shibwe have the light come on, figure out how to carve out a few minutes in the NBA. We know he can rebound, but outside of that, very limited. That's the challenge there. That's why he's on a two-way, despite being 2-time National Player of the Year and leading the college game in rebounds back-to-back years. He knows his niche. You got to be a little bit more diverse. And I don't know how many of you were watching the G League playoffs, but the way in which their opponent played took him out of the game. I think he finished with like 6 points, 4 rebounds, and Tom Hankins couldn't really play him in their one-and-done playoff game because of how the other team played and took away his rebounding specialty. So if he can't do it there and is taken out of the game, the NBA is going to be very difficult, but he's definitely putting in the work and everything. Taking out the bias, Just BU says, why do Bucks fans hate our team or our fan base this much? Do they? I don't know if I've gotten that feel. I guess I haven't got any feel from Bucks fans in general. Now, if you're just going off Twitter, I think that can be toxic either way. There's probably Pacer fans that are belligerent and a little wild and outgoing and don't really represent general Pacer fans. But that has not been my sense. Not saying you're wrong. And I would also argue I really don't have a bias, but I'm just very curious of what you have felt from that. So maybe you're seeing that and I am not. What I do think is interesting is how the Bucks get angered so quickly, the team, and how the Pacers have been able to get under their skin successfully. And the Pacers, for the most part, have handled their emotions quite well, I would say. Nesmith typically has been the guy that's wrapped up teammates to steer them out of confrontations, like Nembhard in Game 2 and Obi Toppin as well. When it was Halliburton tonight for Nesmith. And how about Jenny Busick, the Pacers assistant coach, flying down the court from one end to the other to kind of make sure Nembhard, who is one of her guys in terms of players she warms up and takes a direct impact to play. Assistant coaches are each assigned to different players. Hers, for example, are TJ McConnell and Andrew Nembhard, 2 of the point guards. So she flew all the way down the court. I want to see a wide shot because that was quick acting. All of them have responsibilities on each team, whether it's a trainer, assistant coach, of terms of one or two of the coaches generally are free to go intervene in the situation, and a couple others just strictly watch the bench, make sure no one leaves the bench area, therefore they do not become disqualified. Nolan's back and says this seems off topic, but I'm curious. Seems like Vogel's situation is getting worse. What do you see his future if he gets canned? That's not on Vogel. That's on Matt Ishbia and new owner syndrome. We all knew it wasn't going to necessarily work when they acquired Bradley Beal. They got desperate. They do have a couple superstars in Kevin Durant as well as in Devin Booker. But Beal's not that guy. He's a 30-point guy on a terrible team. Not a guy that I have really believed in or seen as much as you'd like to from. Obviously, the fall guy usually is the coach, and we'll see how this shakes out. That game's ongoing. I don't know what the score is right now because I am live, totally talking with you guys right now, but I'm kind of expecting for that to be a sweep, for the Suns to be checked out and to be 1-2-3 Cancun, basically. Tana says, I blame Bleacher Report, Twitter, and blog boards for the fan animosity. Yeah, I think a lot of that. I would add clutch points, the graphics and leaning into things. Reddit maybe some. I think there's a lot of toxicity that's not necessarily there, in that the stuff that is there, it's a small minority that is trying to elevate it. Appreciate that update on the score. So Suns leading at half. Interesting. Do I expect the NBA to pass down any fines due to the scuffle? Perhaps fines, just because there was kind of upper body, neck area involved, headlock, push, shove. I could see, say, a $15,000 fine for Bobby Portis, maybe Nembhard. You would hope technicals is enough. You understand the moment. It goes back to kind of how I started this conversation, this live postgame show, in that, yes, you understand tensions are high. You did not need to issue technicals for Siakam or Patrick Beverley and them taunting. You give warnings. You pull them aside during a timeout and say, hey, we're not having that. That's the officials trying to set the tone there. And tonight's officials, James Capers, Brian Forte, Brent Barnaky, none of which I think are super experienced. It wasn't my guy, Zach Zarba, out there. I think he's the best official in the league. It wasn't Scott Foster, although if it was Foster, I would absolutely expect for those circumstances and the technicals to be issued because he likes techs. Just BU says, I think it's hilarious. Nembhard could go on a deep run here. Sorry, this heart thing's in the way. I can't. If we go on a deep playoff run, he has to watch his technical count. What's he at now? 2, I think. And I think the number is 7 if the Pacers continue to advance. Perhaps. I think maybe they'll get to one more series. But we'll see. Again, matchups, injuries, all those different things play in. And, maybe the 76ers win another game. And if the Pacers can close it out in 5 games, they get an additional rest period, which is huge for, Tyrese Halliburton and others out there. 3 technicals. Gotcha. Very good. What else do I want to talk about? That Turner stretch I hit on, Halliburton overcoming his back spasms, which is good. It feels like every time he's listed late with back spasms, he has one of his best games of his careers. I don't know why that is. Maybe then you focus on that and worry less about your on-court play. He hesitated less, I thought. I don't know if that's a real factor, but it's absolutely something that I have observed. One thing I do want to note, shout out Nancy Leonard was at tonight's game. Has not been at a Pacers home game, I think, in about a month. At home, been dealing with things. I've been trying to hope to talk to her tomorrow. But good to see her back inside the Fieldhouse for sure. Officials look like they checked Twitter before the game and made sure to diffuse any potential powder keg situations. Not Twitter. I think probably that was the emphasis from the NBA. They know tensions are high. They know it's not a rivalry, as I've said in my preview for the series, but there's bad blood, especially with Portis. Nembhard's had an edge in this series. They want to contain it. They want to minimize it. They want it to be strictly basketball. So, yes, that would absolutely, understandably, be an emphasis. Ben Shepherd's contributions have been good. How about the play? There's an underlying factor in all this. We talk about guys like Myles Turner getting back to the postseason or Pascal Siakam. leading by example, but also with his voice a little bit more. Tyrese Halliburton experiencing the playoffs for the first time. How about guys like you mentioned, Andrew Nembhard or Ben Shepherd? It's unfortunate that Benedict Matherin's not out there playing, but this is invaluable experience, and I think they've risen to the moment, in particular Nembhard. That's a story I really want to get to if I can have time here. So many different things I want to say about that, but Nembhard's been special, and Shepherd, the moment has not seemed like it has been too big for him outside of that first game, which was the case for many of them. He was just doing things outside himself, shooting wildly, not passing to the open guy. But I give everyone a pass on that first game. Good minutes from him tonight, getting 14 minutes, 2 for 2 from the field, 8 points, 2 rebounds during his spurt there. So we shall see. Nancy has to rev the engine. I doubt she'll do that. I don't think she'll get in there and have to do all that. She was in a mask tonight sitting behind the bench. But as long as she's there, I'm good with it. Here's my one recommendation for Dean Haviland. I think the Pacers should welcome back the lady from the First Dance, or not, the Last Dance Netflix documentary, the screaming lady behind the bench. I think they should invite her. She's often at games sitting courtside. I want to see her do it. And you play the Last Dance video, then show her down there. Let's have some fun with it. Didn't get that opportunity coming out of the pandemic when that aired because of the pandemic. No fans initially. And then by that point, I think a lot of people kind of forgot about that. But any last questions before I wrap up here on this YouTube Live? By the way, I should note I was at Fever practice earlier today. It's crazy to believe, but started training camp on that side. And, of course, all eyeballs on Caitlin Clark. How about my guy, Stephen Holder? He's the Colts beat reporter for ESPN. He did live hits at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, not about this playoff game. No, about Caitlin Clark practicing, about practice number 1 for Clark and the Fever. Did those hits from 9 a.m. to like 4 p.m. There was over 20 media members, 5 people from ESPN. That's how big a deal she is. And so if you care about her and the Fever at all, games are going to be sold out all season long. That's going to be an ongoing storyline, but I intend to cover them as best as I can in addition to the Pacers. But obviously Pacers has been my thing for the last 12 years, so that will take precedent. But plenty of coverage about them at Fieldhouse Files and on my YouTube page here as well. But I think I'm going to wrap this one up. If you missed any of it, you can watch on replay or on the Fieldhouse Files podcast. But the Pacers get the win tonight, 126-113 over the Bucks. They have a 3-1 series lead. One more win, and they'll have their first playoff series victory in a decade. And if they do that as well, it will be Rick Carlisle's first playoff series victory, I think, since 2011, since they won a title with the Dallas Mavericks. So that would be great for him as well. First time for this coaching staff since they took over in 2021 after the Nate Bjorkgren disaster. New era, new iteration this year about getting back to the playoffs. Now playing with house money and taking advantage of the situation. The health of the Bucks, not so good, and they've had success. And man, this is some good experience for so many on this Pacers roster. Myles Turner, 29 points, 24 for Tyrese Halliburton. I'd say both of their best playoff games of their career. Myles Turner's played like 25 playoff games. Tyrese Halliburton has only played 4. But much more to come from me here on YouTube, on Fieldhouse Files podcast, and as always, at fieldhousefiles.com. Thanks for everyone for joining me here on the show, and I'll talk to you again after Game 5 in Milwaukee.